Have any comments from the directors?
I just have one thing. I got an email from a resident, looks like Cove, thanking Woodlands Water for the painting of the fire hydrants. Really appreciated the work that was done. And if you want this, Eric, I can.
Sure. Thank you very
For
much.
the record.
They had a schedule.
Yeah, well, I said something in there exceeding expectations in my reply to him. I invited him to make public comment here, but he couldn't make it. So,
Do I have any requests for adjustments on relief for specific charges? Jeannie? Mike? Great, thank you. Directors, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I so move.
Do I- All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Moving on to our regular agenda item. Item number 9, to review the district's draft fiscal 2023-24 operating budget and recommended water rate structure.
Ready? I'd like to direct your attention to a couple things. This is the draft budget memo. It summarizes what you'll see in this document, which is the budget. And then there's a third document we'll talk about here in a minute, and that is the water rate, the results of the water rate study was done and how it affects basically the typical customer. So point out some of the highlights on the budget. Revenue is projected to be 3.8 million. Expenses are projected to be 4.7 million with a net loss of 899,000. I'll go through that in just a second. And it kind of translates to the projected purchase services went up. Purchase services are essentially the projects that are in the TAN. Those are all the services: water repairs, sewer repairs, storm, etc. You have, if you look at the budget, you can kind of see where some of those are. You have the big sewer line project that's coming up. So last year, your budget there was about 50,000. It's 250 this year to finish that Central Sewer Rehabilitation Project. And then water service repairs, we've had some increasing. Mike looks at the last few years of water repairs, and we kind of do an evaluation of what we think is going to be needed. So, but the big hit is that project on the sewer repair. That kind of is the biggest thing that moved the needle. If you look down at the very bottom of that back page, one of the things that we look at, excuse me, I'm looking at the wrong one. I gave you the wrong number. Your budget for sewer repair was, 900,000. Last year it's more than 2 million.
I was gonna say, I thought it
I was holding the wrong one. But same story. And the same project. If you look at the bottom of the page, we kind of look at that number to see where we need to be in terms of some of our reserves. That project in itself, if you'll notice, like in October, at the far left of that, you're in that 6.87 range. You kind of float in that 7 range, and then when that project hits, that is the months of budget coverage that you have.
Mhm.
So you started in that 6 or 7 range, and that's where you've been for a while. That's not terrible. I'd say just with the infrastructure renewal that's coming in the foreseeable future with your aging infrastructure, we need to start moving that number towards 9 or 12. And obviously, this is why. This is an example of how you see how one bump in the night goes whoop, and it takes it from 7 or 8% down to 4 or 5%.
So we are on the right side of, when I say right, I mean the right side of the bathtub curve.
True.
We're climbing.
That's right. That's right. And as you'll see, on the revenue side, obviously you have water rates, you have your tax rate. Your tax rate recommendation we'll hear about in a minute. And that'll be to, and then that goes into the revenue side. And then we've already really talked about the expense side. What also goes into the rates is the water rates. So this year, for the first time ever, Woodlands Water went out and had a retail water and sewer rate study done. It's almost a 700-page spreadsheet that we hired a consultant to do. That consultant is here today, Annalisa Hedden. She's sitting over here, and she's going to talk to you a little bit about just what went into that analysis, the results of which are on that sheet that Neil just, this sheet. So the results of those projected rates, proposed rates, are also in your budget as well. So you've got your proposed tax rate recommendation, we'll just see, and then the water rates, they're both included in your budget itself. So with that, do you have any questions before we hear about the water rate analysis?
I just have one comment. I'm a little concerned about the sustainability going forward of these deficits. What the implications are in the next few years, given the aging infrastructure, et cetera.
Something that I've been talking with the other MUDs about that I think is important is that we look at a 5 or 10 year CIP, because that's really going to show us the roadmap of expenses. We've heard a lot about SJRA's 10-year plan and all the improvements that are necessary for renewal, but you have your own. You have ditches, sewers, and water, and that's aging as well. So we're going to need to start looking at that. Obviously, the sanitary project you're already moving forward with, but we have our own AC water lines as well. So what I would recommend is that we do a 5 or 10 year CIP. What that does is it at least puts it into the pro forma, so that when we're getting a tax rate recommendation or looking at our water rates, we can see what our expenses are. We can see what the trends are, and that can better help us, paint that roadmap to identify how we're going to get to the point of being able to cover our expenses.
So some years ago, 2015 or thereabouts, there was a condition assessment done by a consultant on the sewer system, the likelihood of failure, et cetera.
Right.
Will that be redone or?
Well, the results of which are the project that's.
Yeah.
So this is the fix of that.
Right.
Of that analysis. Well, as you will hear, and this is something that we're interested in as well on the AC side, we're interested to hear what the testing procedures are going to be, and what some of those recommendations are on the SJRA lines, because we're going to need to do it on on your lines as well. And so we'll have to develop a program on how to look at that and how to assess the condition of the AC lines. So we'll look at that. And Mike, I'm not sure on the sanitary side, when we did that analysis, did we cover all 6? Or is there more to analyze in terms of
There is a little bit, but it's very, it's not nothing in the million. It's less than 100.
so not much left to that analysis.
Year 3.
And then the ditches, on the ditch side, there's been a couple districts this year that have had some pretty significant repairs on collapsed old concrete corrugated metal pipe, CMP. And so I suspect that that's going to increase throughout the Woodlands on that, 40 or 50-year-old drainage pipe. So we'll look at what you have and see if there's anything that needs to be put into the capital improvement plan as well.
Can we take a look at the sewer repair, that projection for the current fiscal year? What's going into that? Because it seems like our current year-to-date actual is pretty far behind that.
We bid that job back in May or June. We still have not gotten executed bonds from the contractor. So we were projecting at least 25% of that contract to be done in August and September. It does not look like that's a lot of that's probably going to carry over.
It's wrapped in the same project that's projected for next year.
Okay.
So it's been bid, working through the bonds, and
We only had the one bidder. Remember, we only had one bidder. Unusual situation. The bidder was happy with his number.
it was under
With the contract, but asked something different about the bonds, and Brian reviewed it and thought, no, just go with what's in the contract. So they've been trying to get us the bonds that are required by the contract, not what their standard bonding capacity really is.
Yeah, you have,
And you rolled that forward into next year's budget?
That's what
Okay.
you got.
so on the draft budget, the 611 projected and the 1.2, those are still accurate for that line item?
611 projected is maybe too high now. Maybe lower.
And then would that impact the 1.2?
It will, so it'll push forward.
Yeah.
The total amount's about the same. Right? It's just whether I get some done in September or not, or whether the contractor gets anything done in September. They projected 220,000 that it would get done by the end of September. I just don't think.
Got that. Okay.
Want to hear about how the water rate analysis?
We sure would.
Please, absolutely.
My name is Melissa Head, and I'm a consultant who specializes in water and wastewater rates. Work all over the state and had the pleasure to work with Woodlands Water on a comprehensive rate analysis for all 10 districts. I'll give you kind of a high level view so we don't get too far into the weeds, but the big picture view. We basically use a 4-step process. First step in the process is to establish what we call revenue requirements. Revenue requirements are simply defined as the revenues that we need to recover from your water and wastewater rate in order to meet your expenditures. In establishing those requirements, we start off with your 2024 budgeted expenses, and then we make a couple of adjustments to those expenditures. The big one we just finished talking about, which is that one really big project. You don't need a revenue to pay for that project every single year. So your staff had us adjust that down to about $250,000 for the purpose of establishing a revenue requirement, which they felt is more of a normal annual expense for your sewer repair line item. We also look at, for each district, we looked at their reserves with a goal of getting to at least 9 months reserves for every district. Where you were falling short, we put in at least a little bit to build that reserve back up, just to allow everybody to have some cushion there. From there, once we have our expenses, we then back out what we call revenue offsets. These are things for every water utility, such as late fees, penalties, interest income. And then for MUD districts, we also look at your property taxes. And we took your projected property taxes for next year. We back out of that property tax revenue for storm and drain maintenance, because we're really just focusing on the water and sewer rates, making the assumption that your taxes are going to pay for the storm water piece of everything. Once we have that total revenue requirement established, our next step in the process is to functionalize our costs, which is a goofy word that the American Water Works Association tells us is a real word, using a process called the base extra capacity methodology. To understand this process, first we have to understand and recognize how a water utility is built. We build a water utility with extra capacity to handle times of peak demand. Even if we're fully built out, we still have this extra capacity that sits idle on our system for a large portion of the time, just to allow us to peak. Most commonly in Texas, that peaking is really associated with summer month irrigation. That excess capacity comes at a cost. And so what the base extra capacity methodology does is allow us to understand what that cost is. We put the cost into 3 categories. The first is base cost of service. Base cost of service is essentially if we got to live in a bubble world and we never had to peak, this would be our hypothetical cost of operating the system, of meeting average daily demands. The second category is our extra capacity costs, which are the costs, the incremental increase in cost associated with maintaining that extra capacity on our system. The third category are customer costs. This is basically your customer service and billing mechanism for your district. Once we have a cost into those 3 categories, our next step is to analyze customers and figure out how they're using their water. We then allocate our costs to customers based off of this. Base costs of service are allocated looking at customers' pro rata share of average daily demand. Extra capacity costs of service are looking at their pro rata share of that peaking. And customer cost of service are in their pro rata share of total customer count. We used, for these districts, we looked at residential customer classes, commercial, and then irrigation accounts. Once we've allocated our cost to each individual class of customers, we then design your water and wastewater rates to recover the cost from each specific class of customer. In working with the Woodlands Water, we also had to look at and try to design water rates that would get as many districts as possible on the same rate structure. So to do that, we had some districts that we rounded up a little bit just to get to kind of a same rate schedule. We did have a couple districts that their rates were just too high, so we took them and put them on their own tariff. That being said, I know I went through things fairly quickly, but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
okay.
go ahead.
Go.
I'm curious, you said there was a $250,000 revenue assumption related to this, the sewer repair component of it. And to Neil's point, I mean, that'll be the fourth year that we've budgeted a deficit and it's having an impact. Would it have been prudent to consider a higher amount for that?
So your staff looked at it and felt like what needs to happen before is use that amount for now. Because you were one of the districts that if we had used something higher, we would put you on your own rate tariff, which we can certainly look at. As has been discussed as a recommendation for all of the districts going forward is in the next year to put together a capital improvement plan. Once we have that capital improvement plan, then we can come in and roll up our sleeves and do some long range financial planning. What that would look like is we would start with the expenses. We'd look at a 5-year forecast of not only your operational expenses, but also your capital items. We figure out how you're going to fund it. Some districts may fund them with debt, others may fund them with a certain amount of cash each year, others have reserves, but then we can take a closer look at that number, because for the districts, what happens in those numbers, that's called a repair from a budget, but in reality, it's a one-time cost. So for rate making purposes, it's just not reasonable to put that line item in there. And so we have to kind of figure out, in the better way to do it is instead of doing this, really put pen to paper on what those CIP projects are, how much their cost, and how much we need them. Once we have that, then we can come back and do a very comprehensive financial plan. So that in that, what would happen is those projects, sometimes we would look at reserve funding, sometimes we look at debt, and figure out where that balance is.
So given the dependence then on future financing, it would seem a new CIP is of the highest priority.
I would recommend we work on that for you next year.
So you're talking about the calendar year? Calendar year, not fiscal.
It has to
Fiscal
be fiscal.
has to be fiscal.
No, I would say we wouldn't have time to do that for this fiscal year or
Right.
for this budget cycle, but I would say over this next year, develop that CIP.
Prepping for
Correct.
the next
For
cycle.
the next cycle.
Yeah,
Correct.
got it. Yes, thanks.
More questions?
So this summary here is the recommendation
Yes.
okay, thank you.
And the budget and that there could be some tweaks on things, but, and there's nothing to approve this month, so we'll bring it
Okay.
back for approval next month.
Thank
If
you.
you have questions, let us know. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Have a
Thank
great
you.
afternoon.
That was
Thank
very
you.
thorough. Thank you.
That is it on that, yes.
Okay. Moving on to item number 10, to receive the financial advisor's recommendation concerning the district's proposed 2023 tax rate, determine the intended tax rate, and authorize.
Good afternoon, David Wood with Baird, here today to talk about your tax rate. For the 2023 tax year, page 14 of your board packet begins our tax rate recommendation for this year. We arrived at this recommendation working with staff and your legal counsel. We had a meeting on August 1st and went through everything and came up with the numbers and the proposed rate that you'll see in this letter here. But I'll also mention, setting our tax rate each year is a two-step process. What's on the agenda for today is step one, where we determine the total rate that goes into our notice of public hearing that we publish between this meeting and next meeting. Next meeting, step 2, we conduct the public hearing and levy the rate for 2023. And the rate that goes in that notice, the rate that we determined today is the highest rate that the district can adopt without starting the process over. And so what we're doing today, reviewing everything, but determining a maximum for next month's meeting where we levy the rate. So with all that said, if we're looking at the recommendation, first sentence, first paragraph, what starts our process this year, receiving new values, 2023 values from the Montgomery Central Appraisal District. And those values, including a conservative estimate of the value for the properties that were made for protest. We show a net taxable value for the district of $1,187,857,981. That is an increase, about a 7.2% increase over your 2022 taxable value of about 1.1 billion. So last year, on last year's value, we had a 2022 tax rate in total of 7.7434 cents. Of course, that all went to maintenance and operations, since we don't have any debt outstanding. And this year, we're proposing a tax rate, new values in hand, and new budgets in hand. 2023 tax rate proposed in total to be 7.1842 cents. And so you may be asking, how did we come up with that, 6th decimal place tax rate recommendation? The proposed rate for 2023, again, the 7.1842 cents is the rate which results in an increase on the tax bill for the average homestead of 3.5%. And under the water code and under the legislation that was passed in 2019, as a developed district, which we are, the highest tax rate that we can adopt is the one that generates a 3.5% increase in the tax bill for the average homestead. Generally speaking, some changes in the law here of the last session, but the highest tax rate this year that we can do is the proposed rate again of 7.1842 cents. If you look at page 2 of our recommendation, you'll notice 3 boxes. Top box has some information about the proposed M&O rate as compared to last year's rate. The top row there, the 2022 rate on last year's value generated about $849,000 of revenue for your budget. The proposed rate for 2023 on our new value at 99% tax collections generates about $844,000 for your budget. You notice the M&O tax rate to balance budget with sewer repair, that budget that we just reviewed. We need 15 cents, to balance our budget, which, of course, is something that we can do with our tax revenues as a result of the, the confines that the legislature put on our ability to raise taxes. But yeah, I'm certainly sensitive to the deficit that's, in the budget for this year, and that, it's projected for 2023 fiscal year. Yeah, I would say if we could, raise our tax rate or revenues through maintenance taxes, I would propose that. But, without having election to get voter approval to approve a higher rate, the proposed rate that we're talking about today is our maximum. So with that said, to the middle box here, what is kind of controlling things again, last year's average homestead value was $398,185. That value, last year's rate, resulted in a tax bill for the average homestead of $308. This year, average homestead value is $444,199. That's about 11.5% increase. And but with the decrease in total rate that we're proposing, the percent change in tax bill on the average homestead, 3.5%, as you can see there, and as was discussed earlier. The remainder of the data there in that third box, again, kind of relates to just what we've been talking about. The 2023 mandatory tax election rate is our proposed rate for 2023. Again, highest we can adopt without voter approval to approve a higher rate. So again, we're doing the most with our maintenance tax revenues that we can, again, without having an election. So the proposed rate is just a function of calculating that 3.5% increase on average homestead. Happy to answer any questions.
Yeah. So I think you mentioned that overall, for month 6, the valuation difference was what, 7% or something? Did I hear that correctly? Here we're looking at, you mentioned 11.5% increase in the average value. Walk me through the reasons for the disparity.
So I don't have all the particulars to the appraisal district data, but the 11.5% is the increase in the value of the average homestead. If you look at the increase of the district as a whole, including non-homestead properties, commercial properties, and everything else, the increase is 7.2%. probably don't have a really good sense of kind of the disparity in appraisals between homesteads, maybe, increasing relatively higher than other sorts of properties, but that is the numbers that we got from the appraisal district.
I wonder if the village center went down because of the vacancy, the prolonged vacancy.
We're not privy to what MCAD does, so we don't know any of the granularity of the distribution of change in the valuation. We don't even know what the actual distribution of values are. It's almost certainly not Gaussian. It might be log normal, but I suspect it's a Pareto function following wealth distribution and income distribution, all the rest of it. And that's a whole other world of averaging, shall we say, to be able to get those numbers, if indeed that's what the distribution looks like.
And I will say that, commercial properties do more vigorously protest their values than
Yeah.
standard homeowner.
Yeah.
But I think we can do some research to kind of maybe assign some property categories from last year and
Mhm.
look at this year too. Maybe bring that back to you next month to kind of show.
Yeah, it'd be really helpful to
Where we're at.
to understand where we're going, because at the back of my mind, I'm still looking at the number in parentheses at the bottom of the budget. So, yeah.
Well, the challenge though is that it really doesn't matter so much what your values do, because your revenue generation is what's been restricted by Senate Bill 2.
3.5% change.
Right,
Yeah.
revenue. So if your value went down, then okay, now you can increase your rate by 8% to get to the 3.5 to take into account a reduction in value.
Yeah.
If your value goes up, then you gotta almost lower your tax rate to, get it. If you have an 8% appraised increase and you only go up 3.5, you
You're-
gotta lower. So
You're capped.
the
So,
revenue generation that's restricted, and so
Right.
that's what the district is struggling with.
Yeah.
You've got such a low rate to start with, so 3.5% of a really low number is still a pretty low number.
yeah.
And that's what we're stuck with. So you're either gonna be faced with lot lower expenses, which seems unlikely for an aging system, or you're gonna have to do an election to try to get voter approval for a higher maintenance tax rate.
Mhm.
Or you're gonna have to go with higher water and sewer rates than even what is gonna be implemented this year.
Yeah, you're the type of district that was gonna get caught by that legislation.
Yep.
An aging district with a low tax rate with aging infrastructure coming up. So expenses are going up, your ability to get there.
Harder.
Expensive to do an election.
Is there any movement to get that 3.5% raise?
Oh, no.
Yeah, I can't see that.
That was a big fight last time. Or the time before.
Yeah, no.
You would think there would be with inflation where it is.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
you're,
Or exceptions could be made based upon specific
The
circumstances.
the best that we could do was negotiate the developed versus developing distinction that cities and other large entities don't have. That's a special purpose district. So if you go out and annex a chunk of property, then, you may be able to flip back to developing, but short of that, you're stuck
If
in
it
that
has
3.5%.
debt and say value coming with it, that would help you.
Hmm.
There was such a thing.
Since we're in a city, we can't annex, correct?
Well, it's kind of tongue in cheek. I mean, the district can annex property, but you do have the overlay of the township. For regular mud, you could go and annex non-contiguous property if
okay.
they wanted to, if the landowner wanted to come in, if you had something to offer. But in our case, I think that's probably unlikely.
so that feeling we have is being caught between a rock and a hard place. Yeah.
Yep.
This is not a feeling, it's a fact.
Yeah, or being squeezed in the vice.
There you go.
Okay, it seems like there's little choice in this matter. To me, anyway.
My thoughts exactly.
You
All right, thank you.
know, we have to
There's no action to be
Yeah,
taken.
we'll vote on it
There's no
next
action
month.
next month.
next month.
We do need to publish the.
Yeah,
Right,
but,
there's no action to be taken this month.
okay.
There is action to take to authorize publication.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's, did we do that?
10A,
Yes,
10A,
A and B,
A and B,
publication in the Courier.
okay.
right.
Just the courier?
It's a big bag.
Last year you did the courier and the villager.
So you're required to do the courier. Some districts, sounds like y'all voluntarily also published in the villager to try to get more.
Public notice.
Yeah. Is it, do we do this on social media at all?
Has to be a traditional
It
Yeah,
has to be
means.
paper?
correct.
Wow.
Newspapers love that.
Yeah, but they do.
Well, you charge an arm and a leg.
That's why the rates are so high for that type of.
Really?
In fact, that's the only thing you see in the newspapers these days.
Sure. So, okay.
Look at the Chronicle recently, there's no hits.
Okay, so then I will take a motion to publish in the Courier and the Villager.
Second. Oh, yeah, I'll
Who
make
made
the
the
motion to.
You may,
I will second
okay.
Bruce's motion.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
Oh, it's in the courier only.
no, and the
And
Villager.
the Villager.
Villager. Did I satisfy 10A and B?
You did.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Item 11, the developer update on Grogan's Mill Village Center.
Additional from last month, it's still ongoing. So hopefully sooner rather than later, we'll have something for her.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Item 12, receive the regular monthly SJRA Woodlands Division report, including updates on operations, projects, and public outreach.
Quick report.
Oh.
Unless you have any questions? Hearing no questions, yes.
Vote Neil.
I always have a question,
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to false. I
The Woodlands division that we buy the water from the GRP division, so as the blend ratio changes from what the Castro and budgeted shows, that's going to adjust. So I think it's like $15-16 million of that account is actually just to pay the GRP, the expense portion. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I have a piece of good news for you, Chris. I talked to the person who has been most responsible for complaining to this GECQ about odors. And he says he hasn't smelled anything in months.
Good. That is very good to hear. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Did he move or is he still there?
It's still there. Still there.
We see.
Or maybe he lost his sense of smell.
I told him we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to fix his problem.
Yeah,
I'm glad something came from it.
okay then. No more questions? Item 13, consider an act on additional research by the Senior Center River Authority for the AC water lines. It's a separate document.
Now, we're about to do presentations, so I don't want to blind anybody.
I get to move.
I think we have copies of the presentation up here if anybody did not get
I
one.
didn't get.
And I think we've got some more right here if we need more.
Yeah. I'll take one, please.
Yeah, see if we can not blind.
Yeah.
Right. So thank you very much for having us today. So for those of you that don't know, I'm Connie Curtis with the San Jacinto River Authority. I'm the Director of Technical and Operational Services. And this is Dan Hildebrandt. He is the Technical Services Manager. So we're here today to talk about AC water line replacement program and particularly on the condition-based asset management topic. So we presented to the Board of Trustees last week. So this is basically the same presentation. We took out some of the question slides. So we're going to ask, it takes about 20 minutes. So give us that 20 minutes and then hold your questions till the end and we'll answer whatever questions you have at that point. We're going to hit on 4 topics today, give you a little bit of background of how we've gotten to where we did with our 10-year project plan, talk about condition-based asset management, then some recommendations from SJRA, and then the next steps that we're proposing right now. So with that, Dan's going to start for the first 10 minutes and I'll take the last.
So project plan background. I'm going to start in 2017, 2018 timeframe. This is when SRA internally acknowledged that, we have aging infrastructure, looking at the AC water lines. Woodlands is aging, approximately 50 years old. So we started looking at the break history, issues that we had when we experienced breaks and related to the pipe installation or the construction around that pipe. We also started looking at kind of the consequence of failure side of if pipeline breaks here, these facilities, potentially critical facilities, may be out of service, and the overall service life expectancy of AC pipelines. So using the best knowledge and data we had at that point in time, we internally estimated between technical services department, the Woodlands division, around $100 million to replace those lines. And we prioritized them and laid them out in the 2018 10-year project plan, which was really the first year that we presented to the MUDs AC water line replacements within that project plan. So moving forward, 2019, 2020 timeframe, we acknowledged this was going to be a significant investment and wanted to start conversations with the audit committee, the MUDs regarding financing and funding for this overall program. We made some relatively minor adjustments during that time on the cost estimates just to do some due to some inflation, and it went up to around $109 million. So one of the bigger milestones is the 2021, 2022 timeframe. This is when we got a consultant on board and initiated the preliminary design and leading into the final design of the town center water line. That's one that we've talked a lot about recently. That's currently at a 90% final design. We also hired a separate third-party consultant to come in and really verify what we've done in previous years regarding prioritization of projects, the cost estimating of the projects. So we spent around $120,000 for that third-party firm to come in and help us verify that. What the results of their study was on the Woodlands water system was they laid out a 10-year AC water line replacement program. They also revised and re-estimated the cost of replacement based on the knowledge they had at that time of $149 million. So I handed out, I believe, but I did not. So you don't have one. There is a map, 11 by 17. I think I did. This is just for your reference. You can take this home with you, but it is the 11 segments of AC water line that came out of that consultant's proposed plan. Ultimately, it makes up around 48 miles total, and each one of the different colors distinguishes a separate segment. And those segments are also laid out here in table format from which matches the priority and how they're laid out in our 10-year project plan. Just wanted to show some additional data here regarding, the year installed, proposed replacement year, number of breaks on the line, something we can refer back to. So 2023, first quarter of this year, that's when we're going through our annual revisions of our 10-year project plan. So again, we were concerned a little bit about the cost estimates. We've seen a lot of price escalation in the construction side, in the market, materials, equipment. So we wanted to make sure we had the best numbers we could come up with at that point. So we actually engaged another third-party consultant. It's a consultant that is doing the final design for town center water line. So we felt they were the most qualified with the latest info, talking to local contractors, suppliers, vendors, doing other similar projects and getting proposal costs from those in the region to update our cost estimates for those 11 water line segments. So that is where the price went up again to the $200 million, which is what we presented in our 10-year project plans here back in April. And just as a reminder, that town center water line project is currently at a 90% design. So today we want to provide a little bit more info on what does a condition-based asset management program look like for specifically asbestos cement water pipe, but essentially the same procedures and process could be followed for other material types, possibly further out in our planning when we get to replacing PVC pipes. So Since April 2023, we've talked about this at the MUDs, at the trustee level, and we've been presented with and have found our own engineering articles that are out there. There's a number of articles, peer-reviewed journal articles across the country regarding condition-based programs, replacement of AC pipes. We've gone through, we've read those. We've also discussed with multiple national experts and engineers who some of those have authored those articles, some of them who have also authored sections of AWWA manuals regarding condition-based programs. We've discussed destructive and non-destructive testing approaches and technologies that are out there with a number of vendors. And we've also discussed with some other municipal entities within our region, how are they handling these large capital programs and are taking an approach to replacing the infrastructure like water lines. So just to name a few there, City of Conroe, City of Baytown, Sugar Land, Lake Jackson, Austin, trying to get an idea of what some of the other entities do when they're in a situation like we are. So 4 kind of pieces of condition-based asset management that I'm going to run through in the next few slides: opportunistic sampling, destructive testing, non-destructive testing, and the overall engineering analysis. So opportunistic sampling uncontrolled. What that is essentially when pipes break. So we have, over the past few months here and recently, gone in and revised and relooked at, our procedures for when a pipe breaks regarding how we collect data. So we have a multiple page template form now for collecting different data and attributes when we have a break regarding specific technical data on, size of the pipe, what the, where it broke, was there any observations on how it broke? Did it break at a joint, a valve, just randomly in a place? Was it hit by a contractor? Was it just a natural break? The location, duration of potential customers out of service, impacts on cost side, impacts to potential property damage adjacent to the break. Did you have to shut down traffic, the roadway? So we are collecting as much data as we can, putting that in our asset management software, also noting in our GIS for being able to locate that in the future. And something else going another step further is we have discussed taking any pipe samples that are obtained from that break and sending it off to a laboratory for essentially more destructive testing and potential getting more data out of that we could use in the future. The controlled opportunistic sampling side of things. So this would be essentially a few opportunities on upcoming proposed construction projects. One, the town center water line, which has been funded through the R&R fund up until now. We do not have funding for the actual construction as of now. But that's a large segment of AC water line to where we are going to be having bore pits and digging up sections of that pipe and have the opportunity to remove it, do additional testing on it. One that has been less talked about is the Harper's Landing water line extension. So this is a small segment of new proposed water line to help create kind of a redundant loop. This is over east of 45, Trade Center Parkway. It's a MUD 39 area. Where the opportunity comes here is for tapping that new line into an existing line. We will be tapping it into an existing AC line that is one of the 11 segments laid out in the overall program. So it's just one small little opportunity that we could take a sample of that pipe and get it tested and obtain additional data. This project's at 100% design. We're looking to put this out for proposals in the near future. It is budgeted for. It's been in the 10-year project plan for a number of years now and R&R funded. So that is a fully funded planned project that's going to proceed. And again, through that sampling, we would be able to test samples, send it to a laboratory. Destructive testing. So if we were to go in, do destructive testing, we're going to have to shut down the pipeline. To maintain service to our customers, we're going to have temporary bypass pipe above ground continuing service. We would have a contractor excavate down, remove a segment of that AC pipe, typically joint to joint around 10 to 13 feet. We would have a geotechnical consultant come in, study the soils and the embedment around the original pipe, and then go to a certified laboratory for destructive testing to where you could run a a series of tests, some that are on the chemical side of things, and some on the physical side where you would be crushing the pipe. Ultimately, you're getting additional data to help you determine remaining wall thickness, the strength of the pipe, hardness of the pipe, internal, external degradation that's occurring. On the non-destructive testing side, one of the most common technologies that's been presented to us is an acoustical test of the pipe. With that, we would be needing to shut down segments of the pipe. Again, temporary bypass to maintain service. With that testing, you would have to connect essentially 2 sensors to the pipe. There's potentially you could utilize some hydrants, but the maximum distance we've told they can test is 700 feet. So we don't have hydrants on our lines every 700 feet, so you would have to dig down, tap into the pipe to run those tests. Ultimately, what that acoustical test is doing is sending a wave through the pipe, and it's measuring an average velocity, which then is transferred back to essentially an average stiffness and degradation of the pipe over that 700-foot length. So again, pros and cons to the non-destructive testing and the destructive side, the different technologies that are out there. On the destructive side, you're taking a very distinct point of pipe and testing it, which is that representative of a larger segment? I don't know. On the non-destructive side, you're getting a representative average over a longer stretch, but you might have a small section of pipe in there that's really bad that may skew that average. So again, you're getting more data, but there's still some concerns and the pros and cons of how valid that data is and could be applied to the whole system. Engineering analysis, this would be both on the front end of having a consultant come in and set up a program for us. Where do we test? How much do we test? And do we do non-destructive, destructive? How much of each? Also setting up, a soil sampling program. And then the back end, we collect all this data. What do we do with it? How do we interpret it? A common method that is utilized is predictive modeling softwares. There's a few of them out there that could be utilized, but essentially you're going to get all this additional data, which adds different metrics to determine, the likelihood of failure of that pipe. So right now it's more, the data we have is overall age and the number of breaks, but with all this other additional laboratory data, non-destructive testing data, you're going to have a number of metrics and you might weigh those metrics differently. And what are the trigger points of any one of those that says, all right, we've hit this point on this metric that, the conclusion of that is we need to replace the pipe. So ultimately, you're going to have someone help us and analyze all that and determine what is a prioritized project plan for replacement of the AC pipes. So I'm going to pass it off to Connie. She's going to talk a little bit more about how much testing we do, some of the recommendations and costs associated with it.
And one question. Do we look at the amount of asbestos that might be getting out into the water supply when we have pipe degradation?
We wait till all completely finished before you. So let's do that. Okay.
We'll answer your question when we get to the numbers, okay? All right, so how much proposed testing should we do? So that's really the next question. So Dan's outlined of what kind of testing, destructive, non-destructive, opportunistic. So we have to come up with a budget of some sort. And so the way that we kind of looked at that was we talked to all these national experts and tried to get what I would call a corral around like what you can do. So we looked at it from a maximum level. 1 sample per mile is what they kind of gave as a rule of thumb. And with that, if you take town center out, so acknowledging that we're already down the road on town center, that's 3 miles of pipeline. So there was 48 miles. So we would be proposing the maximum destructive testing that you would do is 45 total locations. What that could look like. So if you look, your map that Dan handed you is 11 by 17. We put some red dots on here of where the proposed test locations, what it could look like. This is schematic. Please don't hold me to where all these red dots are. But this would be the 45, ish number of proposed test locations, just so that you could see this is the maximum number that you would want to grab across the woodlands. If you go into non-destructive testing, it's not as straightforward. It's not as easy as 1 sample per mile. Once again, take town center out, and the national experts kind of looked at our system and said 25 miles of that 45 would probably be an appropriate sample size as a maximum if all you were going to do was non-destructive testing. And so what that would look like is the little black squiggles here is roughly 25 miles. So once again, please don't hold me to where the squiggles are. It's more just for schematic purposes. Then the engineering analysis, as Dan noted, you got to do the upfront engineering and the back end engineering. So that's needed for any scenario that we do for testing. Overall, this would be a maximum in, of what we would need for non-destructive or destructive if we were to do one or the other. But what is our recommendation as SRA? So you need that engineering analysis. After talking to a bunch of these national experts, some of them would tell you do all destructive. Some would tell you do only non-destructive. And some would tell you do the non-destructive first and then do a portion of destructive. And some would flip it the other way. So really what we kind of came up with and some of the guidance we were given was go ahead and budget for half and half. And so that would be 23 test holes for destructive and then 13 miles of non-destructive testing, which would result in that prioritized and scheduled project plan. So what that schematic could look like if you went half and half, you're going to have some places where you may have just a red dot. So just a place for destructive testing. You could have some places where you have just non-destructive testing, and you could have some places that had both. And so please don't hold us to this. This is for schematic purposes, but this is what it could look like as a combination. It could end up being a combination of the two. It could be 2/3 and 1/3, one way or the other. What our recommendation with it is what we want to highlight. This is the prioritized plan from that 2021-2022 study. This was never intended to be a static document. This is always a living document. This column over here is always going to change. We're going to have more breaks that occur every year. And if we begin to see something that is happening, let's say along Sawmill, and we've got an increase in number of breaks, we may need to prioritize that higher. And so this was always going to be a living document, but utilizing whatever data that we get from the destructive and non-destructive testing, essentially that engineering analysis will give us an updated prioritized project plan. So it could change the replacement year and push it out. It could pull it up. But overall, it would help us to be able to prioritize this with better data. At the end, what we're going to need is a consultant. So we're going to have an RFQ for a consulting engineer. We're going to need an RFQ for contractor because the excavation and the temporary water has to be done by a contractor, not a consultant. And then we need a testing lab. So that'll be something that if we move forward with this, these are 3 things that we're going to have to get contracts with in place. How long is it going to take? And how much will it cost is really the next question. We're estimating 4 years for us to get, the half and half kind of model done. So hypothetically, if we were to start in January 2024, we would have that updated project plan by January of 2028. We can focus on some different pieces of it. Those next projects, maybe we can look at sampling those sooner, getting processed to see if it makes sense to go ahead and move forward past a preliminary engineering phase. We can look at some of that and maybe have it completed before 2028. But right now, just overall as a full, thorough, complete project plan update, it would take about 4 years. The estimated cost is about $3.5 million. So that includes pretty much everything: engineering analysis, contractor, geotech boring, destructive and non-destructive testing. So that would get us that updated plan for the asbestos cement pipe. Okay. What we're proposing as next steps from SGRA right now is we're going to continue to do opportunistic testing of any future line break. So if a pipe breaks, we're going to be better at how we record our data. And we're going to improve that. As Dan noted, we've already improved our form. We're going to be committed to doing that so we have better data moving forward. We're here in August to present on this condition-based assessment. So this slide, and this was basically what was presented to the trustees last Wednesday. So number 3, we left as it was presented to the trustees, but we're going to change it based on some recommendations from them. This says at the September MUD meetings for the MUDs to consider to take action to approve a bond, but we're going to change this to be in September for y'all to bring us back any questions you have, and then y'all plan to vote in October. So that's one thing here we wanted to make sure we change. Obviously, the next thing is to talk about the amount of the bond, which is $25 million is what we're proposing, and it's to fund the following things. So $15.5 million for the construction of town center water line. As part of that project, we would plan to perform opportunistic testing. So there's going to be a lot of holes that are already open, places we're going to be needing to remove water lines. So go ahead, take it, let's test it to fit it in with the rest of our asset analysis. We're proposing for B and C, let's move forward with the next two projects on that 2021-2022 project plan. And it's $2 million a piece for preliminary engineering. Our thought process with this is when you add in D for the condition-based assessment at $3.5 million, kind of running two parallel trails of most cities, most municipal entities, if they go into and start to do condition-based asset management, they don't stop replacing any of their pipeline. They keep moving forward while they gather data. And so we're saying, let's start gathering more data and revising that plan with more data, but let's not waste time. Let's continue to move forward with the plan we have as well. So it's two tracks. So essentially you have A, B, and C on one track, and then D on the other track going at the same schedule. And then of that 25 million, E here is just the capital interest that is necessary to float a bond. So that's $2 million there. So that's the end of our presentation. We have a question slide here, but I'm going to stay on this next steps. So Bruce, you had a question.
I guess whether there is any testing for asbestos or that has been proven not to be a problem
So
going into the water supply.
It's tested every 9 years by TCEQ. So they require us to test every 9 years as well as pure mud as well. I was checking earlier, the last time we tested was in 21 and the result was a 0.2 in the limits of 7. So we're well below.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
any other questions? If y'all have other questions, please send them to Eric and he's going to be gathering them and then we're going to be prepping for September. So thank you so much for your time.
I have just one minor comment
Yes, sir.
to commend you on your professionalism last Wednesday.
Oh,
Seriously.
Watch the video if you haven't.
I have,
Yeah, you need to, yeah.
okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you very much. Oh, no, we like to work in the dark. Okay, thank you, Bruce. We are now on item 14 to receive an update on the SJRA's led Spring Creek detention study.
I'll keep that one real short. Really no update other than continuing to discuss with the solar company and trying to schedule some meetings with elected officials to get them knowledgeable about the project. And then it won't be till March, April timeframe is our third public meeting that we'll post it. So we'll keep you updated as we get more.
Thank you. Our attorney's report.
No journal items today. You have items 16 and 17. Go ahead and cover it.
Okay, absolutely.
All right, 16, district information form amendment. Attached to the district information form, as y'all know, is the notice to purchasers. It's provided to folks who may buy property in the district. As we mentioned during the legislative session, one of the changes during the session was to update that form of notice to purchasers to make it a little more user friendly. One of the language was verbatim in the water code and wasn't very easy by lay folks. So work legislature to get that updated and reader friendly. As you probably know, the notice says what your tax rate is, how many bonds you've authorized, how many bonds you've issued, that you're in Houston's ETJ, that you're in the township, things like that to kind of give people a lay of the land when they buy property. So we've updated that. It's on the Google Drive for y'all to review if you'd like, but it's a standard revision to the new language.
So do I have a motion to authorize?
I will move to authorize execution of the amendment as described.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Thank you. Next item, number 17, the amendment to policy number DIR 20. This item relates to a change during the legislative session as well. We talked about the MUD omnibus bill, House Bill 2815, how it had a lot of cleanup items for MUDs. One of which was to update the fees of office for directors. It's been set at $150 for probably 20 plus years. And so that is now tied to the fee that's paid per day to state legislators, and that is set by the Texas Ethics Commission. So we put that language directly into the policy so that we don't have to come back each time the Ethics Commission updates the fees for state legislators. It will automatically update my director fees as well. Currently, it's $241, so a little bit more than $150. But it's still subject to the $7,200 per fiscal year max. While we had the policy open, we went ahead and also added language regarding virtual participation in conferences subject to board approval. Back when this policy was first put together in the early 2000s, there was no such thing as virtual participation, but now I believe that's a pretty common option. So we wanted to add language to make it clear that directors, with the approval of their board, could participate virtually and be compensated for that.
So does this change the compensation that our board gets for each meeting?
Yes.
So it's no longer 150, it's whatever, 7,200 divided by.
Right now,
whatever.
no, right now it's 221.
221.
Subject to a cap of 72.
Okay, so potentially a director could earn $7,200 a year?
It's rare, but it can happen. I don't know about the Woodlands.
Yeah.
Just in general, if a district's got a ton of stuff going and, committee meetings, in the field, then it's possible.
Okay. And so is this increase included in the budget?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's current now, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The bill for the district information form, the notice to purchasers, that's effective September 1st. So we went ahead, wanted to have it on your
Should be
agenda.
ready to go.
Yeah, even though you're going to see the same item again next month,
Right.
because we have your new tax rate, you have to amend it again to have the new tax rate, but we didn't want you to be out of compliance from September 1 and 2.
Got it. Yeah.
So I need a motion to approve.
I propose that we approve the update to the district policy manual.
Okay.
As described.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Review and act upon the resolution in support of Jace Houston.
That item is dead unless you want to resurrect it.
Nope. Okay, I think we move on.
It's done and dusted, isn't it? Pretty much.
The original author and their board decided to not do it.
Okay.
And there was only one other mud that it was going that direction and they decided not to.
Yeah.
So it's still on a couple agendas for the deferrals last month, but
Okay, we're done.
Yeah, we're done.
we will remove it from the agenda.
Thank you. Consider an act on driveway repair on South Red Cedar Circle.
Yes, that was the good news. I
Oh.
tried to.
After me had it. Oh,
So as we left the meeting last month, recall we repaired a water line and just where it was, it kind of messed up part of the street, and this is a private street. So you basically said, well, talk to the local residents and see if they're willing to pay a third. Because there was 2 residents on either side. And so Randy in our office actually arranged that, received the monies from both entities, and we proceeded and the project's done.
yeah,
So
congratulations.
both residents agreed to pay a third. It was $6,900 total, $2,300. And because it met your requirements that you set forth, we said go, and it's done.
Wow, that is good
It was
news.
great.
It's a shame I missed it.
That's all right. I'll get the right email next. I will solve that.
Okay, and then move on to your general manager's report.
Yes, I actually don't have any additional thing to report today. I did want to pass it over to John to talk about the public outreach we're doing.
Good afternoon.
Hey, John.
I apologize. That was not in your packet this month, so supplement there. Get all set. He's got it. So it's hot out. And residents using lots of water. So at times, well, with our emphasis on water conservation now, we're always pushing that message year round, of course, but it's heightened right now in the third quarter of our strategic plan, and these conditions are continuing to heighten it. So we're pushing out more and more messaging on how to use water efficiently, or how to preserve the lawn and landscape, but do it the wise way, the efficient way, and provide tools for customers to help them in that effort. September is going to kick off the fourth quarter of our strategic plan, where we'll segue into heightened emphasis on value, right? Establishing value in our system, in our water system, the infrastructure, the financial aspects, our rates, and so forth. So you'll see a little bit different messaging there, but we will still continue to push the conservation as well. On the second page, Agria statistics report on our website. That is a nice barometer of our overall efforts, the success of those efforts. July came in as our second busiest month ever on our website, be it as far as page views. And then on that bar chart on the right there, our average page views per month for this year are over 30% more than last year, and almost 40% more than our previous 5-year average. So we're continuing to get more traffic. That's good. The weekly e-blast that comes out every Monday morning, that continues to trend upward as far as our open rate. We've moved that open rate up about 4 percentage points since the beginning of the year. That's the number of folks that are actually opening up the email and reading. So that's good news. I'm going to start including an in-person public outreach calendar each month. So you'll see what we're up to. And then if you want to join us, of course, you're always welcome and encouraged. These outreach events are great opportunities to engage with your neighbors and customers. If you want to hit the big ones there, the Landscaping Solutions and Wildflower Festival always draw a big crowd, over 1,000 folks each. And of course, we will be adding to this calendar as we go along. We're going to start seeing more Village Association events and other things come our way, but I'll keep you updated on that. Some examples of our current marketing efforts, digital and print, a lot of statistics there. Not going to go through those, but if you ever have questions for me on why we're doing something the way we're doing, why we're putting our dollars one place or another, I'm happy to talk about that. And we do track these things closely, and we compare them to other opportunities and try to make the best use of our dollars. The Estuary infrastructure consultant is we're going to vote on that on 24th. So the PEC will meet with River Authority staff early September, and then we'll kind of get our plan further developed and how we want to work best with that consultant, and then hopefully we'll be working directly with them in September at some point. Start getting some more good stuff done. And then finally, you'll see a little change on the back of the water bill next month. We're in a couple weeks. We just took some efforts to make better use of that real estate to get our messages across and make it easier for customers to figure out how their water bill is arrived at. Any questions?
Yeah, there were 1 or 2 months had different rates. Is that correct?
Two different months had two different rates.
Do you need a little asterisk?
Including Founders Reserve, we have 4 different versions.
True.
Oh, I
So
see.
this is
Okay.
a template.
Got it.
I'm not even sure.
Yeah,
which one
I'm with
this
you.
is.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. The trustees report.
It was the most interesting meeting. I guess is the right way to put it. Let's see. I think one of the important developments is Region H moving forward with their water plan that we all need to pay attention to, given the growth of the population, especially here in Montgomery County. The Public Education Committee did not meet last Wednesday. We'll be meeting this coming month to go over action items that were just alluded to in how we work with the consultant that SGRA is onboarded or is in the process of onboarding. And that's my report.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any reason to convene an executive session? Okay. Do I have any agenda items for next month's meeting?
Nope.
Okay, with that said, I'll adjourn.
2:40. Excellent.